Ladies and gents, welcome to part 2 of the Workgroup Server 6150/66 restoration video. Right now there's a fan going in my kitchen that's drying off the case as I have now fully sanded it, washed it. We are about to go spray it with some rust-proofing paint at my dad's store, which will bring you along for the journey. First things first though, before we head out to my dad's place to spray paint, we need to tape off a few things on the case that I would like to keep original, and then we're also going to use some clever Apple stickers that came with an old iPhone to cover up the manufacturing date stamp and the little Apple stamp, because I want to keep those original as well. Another thing we're doing too is we're going to go meet up with Mr. Fahrenheit, drop off the motherboard there, so hopefully he can repair it. If not, we're just going to get a replacement board for it. And look who dropped in to join us. We'll go up here. Anyway, enough of this, enough of that, enough of me.
Let's get to it.
Okay, so here is our clean and sanded case. This should hold the paint well. Time to cover up some important information. Oh no, this is not as big as I'd hoped. I wanted to place this over top, but we're either going to miss part of the apple, part of that serial number. So maybe we'll do this. Next up, we have another little stamp right on the end of it. Oh no. We are on our way to my dad's store right now to spray paint this case. It's amazing, we're driving through an area where houses never used to cap really 150 grand or 200 grand. Now most of them are about $500,000 or 700,000. It's just disgusting. Somebody phoned the care police. Did I mention I can't stop farting? And we're here. And away we paint. So painting anything, whether it be a model kit or a computer frame or a car, you want to make sure you're putting it on evenly. And the best way to achieve that is by multiple thin coats. As a Warhammer player, multiple thin coats is something that's drilled into our heads everywhere when painting models, and the same goes for this. You don't want to see streaks or have any runs start with the paint, and you don't want to be filling in corner gaps or any other little gaps that shouldn't have paint in them. And quite frankly, just putting on a couple coats of paint evenly is the best way to achieve that. As you can see, a little bit of dirt got stuck on there. That's what you get spray painting outside, so I wiped it off with my thumb while the paint was still wet, let it dry, and then quickly hit it again. Pretty straightforward, right? And here's what it looks like. After a couple coats and some time to dry in the sun, we have one gorgeous looking case frame. Thank you, Dad. Oh, but wait, what do we have here? This looks like a 6116 CD. Mr. Fahrenheit, gave us some goodies to work with. We have a 6116 CD machine with, I'm gonna go with no rust, as compared, whoa. Anyway, so here's another machine with no rust, which is a fantastic change from, who cares? Anyway, this machine has a rust-free power supply, RF shield, and a few other pieces that we need to complete mine. It also has a chip-free CD drive door. Then we also got some feet, a display cable, and the original motherboard back, which unfortunately could not be saved. And there was someone on the Low End Mac Facebook group, a gentleman by the name of
Steve Max,
who said that he was interested in taking a second look at this thing if we couldn't get it going. So you're probably gonna hear from me, amigo. And before we get started on everything, we have some parts that arrived for the clamshell, which is currently resting in this bucket, as well as the frame sitting over on my other desk. Part 2 of the clamshell should be coming soon. Part 2 of the workgroup server is happening right now. I also want to shout out my man James for the donation through Buy Me a Coffee. That was fantastic. My man's bought 5 coffees for the Canadian Computer Collectors. So let me tell ya, thanks.
×5.
And also, I just want to say on another note, as the first person to donate to the channel, James, you're a wonderful human being. I don't know anything about you specifically, but I think that you're probably a fairly philanthropic person who knows what they like. Someone who would have no trouble attracting a partner. So here's the repainted case. It's not perfect. The paint actually came out pretty well, but what I didn't expect was that even like a full week after drying, it was still a little bit sticky to the touch. So what I had to do was give it a soft, very fine once over with some very fine sandpaper. She's a little dusty. What I think we're gonna probably end up doing is give it a quick wipe with a wet rag, dry it off, and then we're gonna peel out the stickers on the sections I tried to preserve, which should be really interesting.
Using one wet rag and one dry rag, I managed to get all of the dust out of the case from giving it that light sand with fine grit paper. And look at our finished product. It's smooth. It's no longer sticky, like as if it were covered in honey or something. It's actually smooth to the touch, and there is no more visible rust. It is absolutely gorgeous, in my opinion. That's a case you could marry. Time to peel the stickers.
Yeah, baby. Now this one's probably not going to be perfect because of these openings here. Oh, it took a bit of the stamp with it. Not bad though. Very nice.
So now that we have our labels peeled, it's time to start getting stuff ready to put it back into the frame. And that starts with the drive tray. And once that's clean, we can get to the power switch and then slide this right in over top. So here's the power switch, and in goes the tray. Have a nice day. The rear I/O plate snaps in quite easily, and I want you to keep in mind when you're using plastic this old, you gotta be really careful, because it does tend to break. Luckily, these feet came brand new from Mac Effects, so we don't have to worry about them breaking. And wouldn't you say that's a pretty snazzy looking case so far? The paint is so clean, the plastic is clean, everything's so clean. We've reached the point though where we need to start plucking parts out of the 6116, so we're going to start with pulling the recapped motherboard. And actually, we're going to show you a bit of what the process looked like. So here we go to Mr. Fahrenheit's workbench. So starting things off, he's removing the old capacitors from the board. I know some people say that the twist method is a little too brutal for them, but it seems to work in his case. A little bit of flux going on so that we can clean up these pads. And this is a process of removing the old solder jive from these pads, if I'm not mistaken. If I am mistaken, my apologies to the mayor. So there's some old junk. Just going to wipe it right off. And make way for some isopropyl alcohol to clean up any sort of remaining sediment or dirt that may be there. Using a Q-tip, you can apply said isopropyl alcohol like a boss. Never let pads tell you what to do. A little more flux, and it's almost time to start putting those fresh caps on. So here we go. Capacitor number 1. Or possibly 2. Or 3 or 4. I don't actually know how many he's put on at this point, but this was a good angle to get, and we have kind of a similar process directly above in this shot, which is very educational. You know that we strive to be relatively educational on this channel. It's all a learning process, and you're just here for the ride. So buckle up and strap yourself in, get ready to feel the G's. And here's the finished product. One clean, recapped, delicious Macintosh 6100 60 megahertz 60 megahertz board. So here's some footage of testing the finished product. Now keep in mind we only showed footage of him replacing a few capacitors, but he did all of them on the board. We just don't have time to look at every single capacitor, unfortunately, though I wish we did. And as you can see, we have a working motherboard. So at this point, Ms. Fahrenheit ran a couple tests, including graphics test, as you can see here. There was also a few additional ones after the fact, just to make sure that everything was working on the board beyond just the capacitors. We wanted to look at the RAM and the cache and other things. Now, one thing we did do, which didn't work out, is we moved the cache over from the 66 megahertz board to the 60. And that ended up being a mistake, because it got extremely hot. And then lastly is just a preview of some of the software Mr. Fahrenheit has, as he is a collector and an archiver, and he likes to show it off. I mean, who wouldn't? So let's get back to the 6116 CD that we were plucking parts from. We don't need this floppy drive, but what we do need is a power supply, and unfortunately you can't get it out without removing the floppy. But with that floppy out of the way, it slides out quite easily, just one screw holding it in. This one was a bit dirty, so we had to hit it with a vacuum. You know we love to vacuum here on this channel. And in she goes to our clean and freshly painted case frame. Must be its birthday. So here's where we're sitting. Got a power supply, we got a drive tray, we got a power button. What's next? Well, that would be a freshly cleaned plastic shield that sits gently underneath the motherboard. The one that came out of the 6150 had some stains on it, so I saved the one from the 6116. They're basically the same part. In goes our recapped 60 megahertz motherboard, and we now have to just attach the appropriate cables. Not a whole lot to it here. Not a whole lot to it, just like me. Ladies. And in goes the original floppy drive. In goes the original hard drive. And in goes the original optical drive. Oh, wait, no, we got a RF shield for the hard drive. Now the optical drive goes in. Your GD right. Little RF shield for that too, and let's take a look at things. So obviously the RF shields from the old machine aren't perfect, but you know, frankly, they're not visible when the case is on it, so I'm not too worried about it. Time to connect our drives. Make sure everything's good to go. And that optical drive, ironically, we never ended up testing. Now that I'm doing this voiceover, I realize we don't have any footage of me testing it. Do I know if it works? In this moment, no, I don't. That's how thorough a content creator I am. So, everything is basically plugged back in. It is now time to figure out our top case. So, as I'd complained about earlier in the video, the drive bezel for the optical drive was chipped, and the one on the 6116 CD machine was not. I was not sure if there was going to be a color contrast due to the fact that these machines grew up in different neighborhoods. But it turned out pretty good in the end, and I had to be extra careful about not breaking the plastic clips. Again, on machines this old, the plastic is of the worst quality and is just dying for any excuse to break. A little quick cleanup of that optical drive, and she's as good as new. Almost. Sort of. So here's our finished machine. Beyond the cache stick that has to come out, because it gets too hot. So let's give her the old testorino, as Ned Flanders would say. It's a pretty hideous boot chime. But is that really the fault of the machine? I would say no. That's the fault of the parents. Holy sh**. Well, shards. The dang old hard drive's dang old broken. So the hard drive is completely dead, which is kind of par for the course for these 26-year-old plus SCSI drives. It reminds me of well, it's got to remind me of something. So now what? Well, got a hold of Mr. Fahrenheit, and he's cooking up some goodies for us. We are not going to bother replacing the SCSI drive with another SCSI drive, which may not work, or it might work for a few months and then die anyway. We're actually going to go for the Jazz drive. That's right.
Yes.
So he's putting together a bunch of Jazz discs for me, and some of the software that's going to be on them are things like classic games, 6150 software specifically, and then some recovery tools and OSs for future restorations and, even older machines than this one. Lights, camera, sax-shin, like saxophones, on our first foray into using Jazz drives. This is a big leap forward for me because I have a lot of old machines and had basically no way to get software on them before I ended up purchasing this Jazz drive in a collection from someone. I always had the Jazz drive, never used it before, never really knew if there was going to be a learning curve or anything. Turns out there really isn't. It reads it as a drive, you plug it in, and you're good to go. And Mr. Fahrenheit was actually kind enough to put together a number of Jazz discs for me that had tons and tons of software on them. We had one with Workgroup Server 6150 software. We had one with recovery tools for 7.5 and 8.5. We had another one with games. So these were super helpful for me, and having them was going to make things a lot easier going forward. Restoring old beige Macs is now something I'm a lot more confident in doing because I can actually show you them working afterward. Another cool detail is that Mr. Fahrenheit's actually looking to make these discs and sell them online, where you can just have access to massive amounts of classic Apple software, which would ordinarily take a long time for you to track down on your own. So these are very thorough and are definitely worth the cost, which I think he said they'd be roughly $30 or $40 Canadian. Here we are running the RAM-o-meter, just making sure that's the cache that's the problem and not the RAM. RAM turned out fine. Clockometer is a great way to see your processor speed, but we're all done here. So after pulling out the cache card, which was blistering hot, it was time to restart and play some games like SimCity 2000, the Maxis Classic. So growing up, I used to have SimCity 2000, or I should say my dad had SimCity 2000, because I was too young to really understand arguably the most important part of it, which is budgeting. Budgeting as a child is like, I have $1, how much candy can I get? Not how much income tax is coming in and is that enough to cover our utilities, But once my dad would set the budget up for me, it was off to the races and I was having fun just making stuff. Enjoying the simulation. Here comes Sim Earth. This is not a game that I played as a child. We did not have Sim Earth in our home. The Earth killed my father, actually.
Which isn't true. You saw my dad earlier in this video, so he's fine. So another game I never had growing up, but I am totally stoked to play is Sim Tower. I'm a huge Maxis fanboy, so all of the Sim series is something that I have a lot of appreciation for. As you can see, Sim Tower runs mostly well on this machine. Reminds me a lot of the mobile game Tiny Tower, which Cough is probably making a bunch of people roll over in their graves. That's just the one I experienced first. I'm sorry. Sim Ant, also another Maxis classic, seemingly running fine on this computer. Granted, it's a pretty basic game. Tried to get Space Quest 3 to start, and actually it wouldn't do it at all. Like, it just forced a reboot on the machine. I'm assuming because it's too old. I think that was made for a lot earlier machines. Coming up next is Monkey Island 2, which runs really nicely, and actually the color graphics look really great on the LCD. And, you know, that's more probably the LCD than anything, but they look great nonetheless. These are those classic exploration games, the point-and-click adventure type. Where do you think you're going, Fancy Pants? Valid question. We got Holiday Lemmings. What a hideous background that is. You know, some of the really early design on PC games was just atrocious. Yeah, this reminds me of playing video games in my aunt's computer, you know, in the country years ago. Computers are for typing. It's now time for some Marathon. So Marathon's kind of a fun sci-fi game with you know, that early first-person shooter vibe you saw a lot of in Doom and Duke Nukem. Not a game that I've played before, but I'm definitely stoked to try it. Got the original Prince of Persia, another PC classic. And when I say PC, I mean personal computer. I don't actually mean, like, Mac PC. And don't fall in the... There we go. Spectre. Now, this is an interesting game. Actually, when I first saw this game, I almost had a flashback to a dream that I had about a LAN party where people were playing basic 8-bit games like this. It's a dream I've had a number of times, not just once. And so playing Spectre, really... You know, I started to wonder, is this the game I saw in my dream? It feels so similar. Anyway, that probably makes me sound really stupid, so here we go with Bloodbath. Let's just try some senseless murder. Not really too much meat on the bone in Bloodbath. And we got classic Myst. Myst runs, you know, just as well as you'd expect on a computer of this age, because it's such a basic game. So lots you can do on here. Hey all you cool cats and kittens, that is it for the 6150, 66, or should we say 60. We didn't happen to track down an actual 66 megahertz board, so right now we have a recapped 6160 board in here. And the machine works great, beside the fact that the hard drive is dead. I'm not too worried about because Jazz is a much more dependable medium and offers a lot more flexibility. So I'm going to call this one done, just beyond the motherboard. So if I come across a 66 megahertz motherboard, happy to buy it, get it recapped, and throw it right in here. If you know someone with a 66 megahertz board and they are sure it's 66 megahertz, send them my way. I also want to give another shout out to my man James, who sent 5 coffees, count them up, through the Buy Me a Coffee link, which can be found in the description below. See this? I'm pointing to the description. If you want to support the channel, take a look on there. Anything is appreciated. I also want to encourage everyone here to like and subscribe before we run out of time. I know it's an annoying thing to do, but it does help me get closer to that 1,000 subscriber benchmark, which we are really pushing for. Let's all just enjoy life. It's June. Let's celebrate. Let's get weird with it. Let's pour some chili in a sleeping bag and spend the night outside, you know? Anyway, let's call it there. That's it for this one. Thanks for tuning in. Yabba dabba doo. Yabba dabba doo. Yabba dabba doo. Hey folks, one more thing. Just before you go,
I want to let you know we're trying to improve the channel right now. As it stands, I film on a Galaxy S9 phone with a crack in the screen, and my tripod is being held together with tape because the adjuster unthreaded itself inside the threads of the nut that keeps everything tight, that controls whether the camera goes up or down. If the camera is slowly moving while I'm talking right now, it's because the packing tape is being stressed. So if you'd like to support the channel, get a shout out, and help me get some better equipment, check out the link in the description below for Buy Me a Coffee.